So let's set the record straight on a few things. First off, the party of insurrection has zero credibility. Zero credibility when it comes to protecting law enforcement officers. It was a Republican president who incited the January 6th insurrection and coup attempt because he refused to accept that he lost the 2020 election. It was Republican politicians who enabled January 6th by peddling lies about the election.
Okay, so you just saw the clip. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is everything wrong with Washington in one little clip. You get called to a hearing to talk about supporting local police, and what's the first thing the squad does? Deflect, deflect, deflect. We're going to watch this whole exchange between Cy Bush and Mike Johnson. Pay close attention, because you'll see one person launch an unreasonable personal attack, and then you'll see the other person calmly pull out the receipts. Let's get into it. Gentle is recognized.
St. Louis and I are here today in support of genuine community safety and in opposition to hollow, hypocritical attempts to distract from policies that make our communities less safe. That's exactly what this resolution is. It's an empty and desperate ploy by Republicans to avoid responsibility for policies they support that are getting people killed in St. Louis and across this country. So let's set the record straight on a few things. First off, the party of insurrection has zero credibility. Zero credibility when it comes to protecting law enforcement officers. It was a Republican president who incited the January 6th insurrection and coup attempt because he refused to accept that he lost the 2020 election. It was Republican politicians who enabled January 6th by peddling lies about the election. And it was a mob who supported these Republicans that stormed the Capitol and violently assaulted law enforcement officers. If Republicans cared about violence against law enforcement, they would be marking up a resolution condemning themselves. But the fact is that Republicans don't care about violence against law enforcement, and they really don't care about law enforcement at all. They will support any number of abuses that law enforcement inflicts on communities like St. Louis. But as soon as a law enforcement agency takes a single step towards holding them and their cult leader, Donald Trump, responsible for their criminal behavior, that agency becomes public enemy number one. So Republicans don't care about law enforcement. They support mass incarceration for Black and brown communities and freedom from accountability for themselves. And it is sickening to hear Republican politicians talk about public safety while they contribute to the crisis of violence in this country. As I have pointed out many times in this committee, the states with the weakest gun laws, like my own in Missouri, have Republican legislatures and governors and the highest rates of gun violence in our country. Republicans also take every opportunity they get to spread fear and distrust in our communities. These moral and policy failures have resulted in firearms flooding municipalities that are unable to override those state-level policies, and an American public that is on a hair trigger and primed for violence. So let's get it straight. Republicans are the arsonists, not the firefighters. They don't get to enable violent insurrection and rampant gun violence and police brutality and then show up and pretend like we should just listen to anything they say about policing and public safety. It is a farce, and it's a distraction from policies that would actually save lives. Those policies do not invest in violence. They invest in communities. They recognize that we will never incarcerate ourselves to safety. They will support non-police first responders, mental health and counseling resources, community-based employment programs, community violence prevention and interruption programs, after-school programs, substance use treatment programs, public health and other wraparound services, affordable food and housing, more parks and green spaces, and re-entry programs. That's just to name a few. So that's exactly why I introduced the People's Response Act, which would establish a division of community safety within the Department of Health and Human Services to research and fund evidence-based strategies that are proven to prevent violence and effectively manage crisis situations. So unlike these Fox News talking points, the PRA is a real proposal with real solutions that will save lives in St. Louis and nationwide. And it's not only this proposal. There are proposals that adopt a community-based approach to public safety. Many of my Democratic colleagues have introduced proposals that would break the cycle of violence, invest in mental health resources, support counselors, not criminalization, ensure housing for all, and support other non-carceral interventions that would make a material difference in people's lives. But we're not here today to consider real solutions that will make people's lives better. We're here as a distraction from the sad truth that dangerous MAGA Republican policies make us less safe. They deprive us of basic investments that would move us closer to a genuine community safety. And at the end of the day, Republicans refuse to consider those investments because Republicans are not seeking solutions to the problem.
Gentlelady's time.
They are the problem.
Gentleman from New Jersey yields to the gentleman from Louisiana.
I thank the gentleman from New Jersey. I want to welcome Ms. Bush to the committee. Did she leave already? Oh, is she still here? That's unfortunate. I was going to point out to her a couple of ironies. She came to lecture us. She was here for 5 minutes and 3 seconds. I appreciate her time investment. She came to lecture us about, quote, avoiding responsibility. We've had 4 full committee markups. She has not attended 3 of the 4. I'm not sure today her 5 minutes counts as an attendance, but let's say she's made 2 of them now. I was going to ask her if she's still in favor of defunding the police because we have her on record more times than I can count of having been the great champion of that. She wanted to talk about responsible investments that will make a difference. I wanted to ask her how that defunding police thing worked out. I think everybody in the country knows that we're facing chaos and a catastrophe of crime, violent crime, in all the major cities that she went and protested in, and many more that took the cue. I wanted to ask her about the reality of how that works out in real life. You know, she accuses us of engaging in talking points. We're trying to pass meaningful legislation to solve these problems, and she is advancing policies and ideas that create the mayhem. So, wow. It's so unfortunate that she's not here to engage in a colloquy on that. But I'm not surprised. This is what we get from the radical left. She is part of that radical left that is bringing down the party and having them associated with the crime crisis that we have on the streets. This is the very reason that we need Police Week, to reinforce our support for the brave men and women who are on the front lines, that thin blue line, who put their lives on the line every single day, and we lose them now at alarming rates in the line of duty, trying to protect their communities from wacko, crazy, maddening policies like the ones that Ms. Bush has supported in Congress. I will also point out, as we noted earlier, she was the vice chair of the Crime Subcommittee of Judiciary, and she doesn't believe in funding police. What a tragedy that she's not here to join us. I yield back.
Will the gentleman yield?
Thank you. I will. I need about a minute here. You know what strikes me as, I don't want to use the word humorous. I don't know what else to use. You all were in charge for 2 years. You had the presidency. You had the House. You had the Senate. You controlled it all. You could do pretty much anything that you wanted to do. And all I remember happening, I was out there. I was on the street talking to my people. I remember what happened in Congress was to demean, diminish, defund, despise the police. And now you say a wholly, totally different thing. And then you have somebody else come along, and I don't know her very well, who stays here for 5 minutes after most of us on both sides have been here for hours, at least trying to hash this out. She says some real mean stuff and walks away. And guess what? That real mean stuff's not going to work. It's not the real world. You need law and order. You need police. You need safety. And you know what? I do have some urban areas in my district and rural. And you know what? In my district, when I talk to people, whether they're Vietnamese, whether they're black, whether they're Hispanic, I say, what's the #1 issue? And they constantly say, like the city of Atlantic City, They want better lighting, they want more safety, they want more police. They want to be safe. They don't want their kids to get hurt. They don't want their stores to get robbed. And you all were against that. And you had control of everything.
All right, so let's break this down, because what we just saw was a masterclass in political gaslighting, followed by a surgical fact check. First, Cori Bush gets up to speak. Now the resolution on the table is about supporting local police and condemning the defund the police movement. A pretty simple common sense idea, right? So what does she do? Does she debate the merits of the resolution? Does she talk about funding levels or how to support officers? No, of course not. She immediately launches into a completely different topic. She calls the Republicans the party of insurrection and says they have zero credibility. Let's be clear about what this tactic is. It's a total deflection. She can't defend her own position on police, so she has to try and gaslight the entire room by changing the subject to January 6. It's a classic whataboutism designed to make everyone forget what they're even talking about. She says they don't really care about police. Think about that. The people trying to pass a resolution supporting police are the ones who don't care. But the person who has repeatedly called to defund and abolish the police, she's the real champion for genuine community safety. It's upside-down world, and she talks about her People's Response Act, which is just code for that same failed ideology. Genuine safety isn't a cop showing up when you call 911. It's a social worker showing up 2 days later. That's not safety, that's a fantasy. But here's the most telling part of her entire performance. After she drops that grenade after calling all her colleagues insurrectionists and hypocrites, what does she do? She leaves. She walks right out because she does not want to sit for the truth. Typical Democrats' behavior right there. It is the definition of a political hit and run. She couldn't stay for 1 minute to listen to her response. She couldn't stand there and defend her own words. She just launched the attack and ran away. And that is where Mike Johnson comes in. This is how you handle it. He doesn't get red in the face. He doesn't scream. He just calmly points out, hey, the person who just lit the room on fire, she's already gone. And then he does the one thing Cori Bush was terrified of. He pulls up the receipts, reminds her she is part of the problem. But unlike her, he doesn't come with baseless accusations. He comes with facts. He just reads her own words back to the committee. And this is why she left. She knew this was coming. Mike Johnson reads her tweet. My call to defund the police is a call for humanity. He reads her interview where she says, yes, I mean defund the police. We need to defund the police. This is the whole ballgame, folks. She is the defund the police movement. He points out the tragic irony that her own city of St. Louis is suffering from catastrophic crime in large part because of these exact ideas. He completely debunks her entire premise. She tried to make the debate about January 6th. Mike Johnson, by simply using her own words, brought the debate right back to where it belongs, the insane, radical and dangerous defund the police movement that she is the #1 cheerleader for, and that's why she ran. She had no defense. This is the fight in a nutshell. One side brings slogans, gaslighting and personal attacks, then runs for the exit. The other side brings the facts, reads the receipts and exposes the hypocrisy. Who do you think is actually trying to make communities safer? The person who wants to abolish cops or the person calling them out for it? Let me know what you think down in the comments. This was a wild one. See you in the next video.